It's just preparing.
Okay, Kate.
Like the American voice.
They're always American voices, aren't they? All these things, even the toys have American voice.
Right. Good evening and welcome to the meeting of the Folkestone and Hythe District and Parish Council's Joint Committee. Please note this meeting is being streamed live to the internet. Please could all members ensure their microphone is set to mute unless they are speaking to reduce any background noise. Members should use the raise hand button when they wish to speak. We come to the first item on the agenda, which is appointment of chairman, and it's the turn of the District Council to chair this meeting, this session. Have your nominations.
Close, Jenny.
Thank you. And a seconder for that?
I'll second.
Thank you.
Thank you very much,
Happy
Mem.
with that.
Oh.
I'll hand over to you, Councillor Linsby.
Thank you, members, and thank you for attending the meeting this evening. The next item on the agenda is apologies for absence, and I know Ewan Green has sent his apologies, but Andrew Rush is here for us, so I don't know if there are any other apologies. We seem to be a bit low on numbers, I think.
Yes, we have Councillor Martin Sweeney has given his apologies, and we have Councillor Hills as his substitute this evening.
Right. Okay, thank you. Well, welcome, Tony. Item number 3 is then declarations of interest. Are there any declarations of interest? No. Item number 4, it's the minutes of the previous meeting. Are you all happy? It's a correct record of the previous meeting. All those in favour?
Agreed.
Agreed. Thank you very much indeed. And item 5, which is obviously the main substance of this meeting, is the waste collection service. Andrew Rush is going to give us a presentation, and then there will be the opportunity to ask questions or make comments or look at it a bit more in depth if you'd like to. And that was the reason why it was kept to one item on the agenda tonight. So Andrew, I think you're here with us.
I am.
It's over to you, please.
Thank you, Chair. I'm going to share my screen and put a presentation up, if that's okay. So do tell me if you can see this. Are you able to see that?
Yes, we can see it.
Yeah.
Thank you, Andrew.
Thank you. Thank you.
That's fine.
Okay. First of all, just introduce myself. I'm Andrew Rush. I'm the Regulatory Services and Corporate Contracts Lead here at Folkestone and Hythe District Council. And obviously the presentation tonight is an update on the waste collection service. And just to sort of give you some background, on the presentation, I've been asked to give a presentation outlining the challenges which affected the district's waste collection service recently and an overview of the steps being taken to address these issues. So what I'm going to do this evening is I'm going to give firstly some background about the contract. I'm going to give some background to the intentions of what was called the route optimization project, which took place in May of this year. I'm going to explain some of the challenges and quite frankly, some of the problems that came to light from that particular project. And then I'm going to outline the actions and interventions made by the council in the intervening months, and then just finish off with the current position of the contract. So firstly, some background on the contract. Contract is with Veolia for waste and recycling collections, and that obviously includes our garden waste service, our food waste service, clinical waste as well for households, and street cleansing. And the contract is a new contract, although as many of you will know, we've been contracted with Veolia for over 10 years now. And it's a joint contract with Dover District Council, as was the previous one. And it's a contract that's jointly managed through the combined Dover and Folkestone and Hythe waste team. The new contract started on the 6th of January this year, And just obviously to give you an idea of the scale, we serve over 52,000 households each week, obviously for the refuse and collection. So in the beginning of the year, the contractors Veolia came to us with proposals to carry out what is called a route optimization exercise, which was to review the routes that we currently had and the days, and make some suggestions or carry out an exercise about how they could be made more efficient. And there was some very good intentions behind this. The first was that the routes had been largely unchanged for 10 years. And so, of course, there's been new housing and changes in waste tonnages, particularly shift away from refuse collection, but to recycling collection. It was to create a more efficient service. We were getting a whole new fleet of waste vehicles coming through. And so it's to create more efficient service and make better use of these new vehicles. There was environmental aims as well. That was to reduce the carbon emissions by having more efficient service. And that was quite important at the start of an 8-year contract, that we got those efficiencies in and those routes in early, because they'd all contribute to our carbon goals. And overall, there was about 48% of properties within the district were going to have changes to their day or week or a combination of both. So there was an extensive review of these proposals before they came in force, and council particularly looked at how the change will be communicated to residents and making sure that there was sufficient extra collections for the intervening weeks when people were changing from day to week, to make sure that particularly the general refuse was collected. But there was significant problems that arose within this project. And I'm just going to outline some of them now. We'll give a summary of what those were. The first thing that came to light, or came to our attention really, was that there were errors in the design and the modelling of the new routes. So the number of properties between each day wasn't probably correctly balanced, and there was they probably had not taken full account of particularly the additional tonnages we have been receiving in terms of recyclate during obviously COVID and COVID lockdowns. There was, in our opinion, insufficient surveying of the new routes before implementation, which is obviously particularly critical for the rural locations, but also came to light that some of the local knowledge that had been gained over the last 10 years was not transferred. And so we had problems with what we'd call presentation points for communal properties. So where they've left their bulk, where people, flats have left their bulk bins and if they're locked away, and some problems with assisted collections. There were issues with the data transfer, and there was a new IT system brought in by the contractor at the same time, which had problems bedding in. There was some lack of testing of the new routes. I mean, I think probably what was more the problem in that case was not just the number of changes on the routes, but also that the crews and drivers were were mixed up. So you had new crews going to new areas, which obviously would take some time to bed in. And then certainly from probably about mid-June onwards, this is when a sort of second stage of problems arose, and this is through the national sort of HGV driver shortages, which you're probably all aware of. And this eventually led to us having to suspend the garden waste service as of the 22nd of July. So, as I said, there was, when the project started, it was anticipated that there would be some problem, there'd be some disruption to start off with, but obviously it carried on far longer than anticipated. So I'm just going to outline some of the actions and the interventions that the council took through these intervening months. So firstly, it's worth saying that since the start of the project, since May, the waste team meet daily with Veolia to monitor performance. And I think that that's when, after about 2 or 3 weeks of performance and the problems, there was no sort of natural curve, there was no sort of improvement. That's when we started escalating these issues up to Veolia senior management and our concerns. We had already agreed with the contractor to put on rounds on the Saturday so that there could be catch up from any backlogs earlier in the week, so that the service could start the next and following week as up to date as possible. Then there, as I say, there was escalation to Veolia senior management around about the beginning of June, and there's been continued regular liaison at the senior level from the council with Veolia, and some pretty robust discussions about the service throughout that time. At the council's bidding, Veolia put in what was called a recovery plan, and that was in about mid-June, and that involved bringing in additional vehicles and drivers and loaders so that it would help resource the routes. We also brought in additional staff into the contact centre because of the high level of contact we were getting from the public. And then towards the end of June, Veolia themselves set up a dedicated call centre just for missed bin reporting, so that we could segment out those calls from our other business and they could be dealt with at source. So in addition, some further actions were taken. One was a round review, and a survey was carried out by an external company of the existing routes to make sort of further changes. And throughout this process, the waste team were investigating problem solving repeated misses. So what you would find is we would have problems with the routes in terms of being completed, but we'd also have repeated problems over several, some streets, which would occur either week after week, and they needed much thorough investigation. For example, checking that they had been correctly listed on computer on databases, that presentation points were correct, that the right vehicle had been allocated to the round, whether or not either need a narrow vehicle or an ultra narrow vehicle. So a lot of work carried out throughout this period, sort of problem solving individual sort of repeat misses. And of course, we've applied the contract penalties within the contract for the performance. So in about mid-June, we had a action plan in place, and it was starting to improve matters. Then the HGV's driver shortage really began to bite. So what we found was that Veolia was struggling to get backup crews for when leave was taking place initially. Then they were having trouble recruiting new drivers, and this began to firstly affect the additional resources. So we had extra drivers coming in, and they became the core drivers because we need the core rounds supported. And then we had problems with actually manning the core rounds. And in the week commencing around about the 19th of July, we had an added problem of around about 20% of the frontline Veolia staff were lost to the what was called, the pandemic. So in that week, we lost about 20% of the frontline staff, and we were getting such backlogs that by the Thursday, we had to take the very difficult decision to suspend the garden waste service. So those crews could be transferred into the core services and effectively maintain the recycling grounds. This was, as I say, a very difficult decision. We were very conscious of the impact that this would have on residents, on top of all the impacts that happened up to this point. But it did allow the contractor time to stabilize the service and bring in improvements. And I'm happy to say, as I think I heard some of you discussing earlier, garden waste will be resuming in the district from the 27th of September. So Veolia have addressed their HGV driver shortages, by no means out the woods, but as a council, we've been raising the issues with central government and the local government association, And the earlier have introduced driver retention incentives, and they've got a grow your own sort of internal driver check. I've put changing. I think should be training, internal driver training scheme, and obviously they've upped their recruitment. So give you an idea of where we are now. So this is we get daily reports of round completion for the day, and then obviously we average them over the week. So on our most difficult week which is the week we suspended garden waste, the refuse was running, that was the first one there, the refuse was running at 98% completion, recycling was running at 75, and food at 76. But over the past, I'm sorry, I've made a mistake. I'll put the 27th of September, I mean the 27th of August, and then the 3rd of September. Over those last 3 weeks, and from the period of time from July onwards, we've had a much more stable service. And we've actually, with the additional recruitment come in, we've actually seen a significant improvement in performance in the last month and a half. And this week, these good figures have continued, and we're probably running very close now to 100% round completion. And as I said, garden waste will restart week commencing the 27th of September. So I hope that's giving you a better understanding of how the project started, the intentions behind it, problems that we faced, and how we've actually the actions that have been taken over the intervening months to bring the service back to where it should be. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much indeed, Andrew. I just wonder whether it's worth mentioning anything about the task and finish group, like overview and scrutiny.
Yes, thank you, Chair. The council set up round about July, obviously in response to public concern about the service, task and finish group, which was a subset of our overview and scrutiny committee, and they have done a very intensive investigation of the issues. And the slide I showed you about the problems identified with the project is a direct take from the conclusions reached by the task and finish group, and is available on our website, the findings of that group.
Thank you, Andrew. Would you mind taking or not sharing your screen now so that I can see?
Oh, sorry. Yes, I'll stop.
Thank you very much. Right, I think I'm not sure who was first, but I've got Tony with his hand up.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. This is extremely good news. I can't stress how good news is out in the marsh. It's brilliant. But I'm concerned, how are you going to notify people? Are you going to post all bin holders a letter out to tell them? Because I'll put it on social media, obviously, and it's on the website for the district, but not everybody goes on that. So how are you going to communicate this extremely good news? Thank you.
Andrew,
yes,
would you like to answer that? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. You make a very good point about garden waste and making sure that people know that it's been restarted. Not all of our garden waste subscribers are social media people. And what we're doing today, I've been working with our comms team, and we'll be sending out letters. So it's a 2-week cycle. So we'll be sending out letters to those whose rounds restart on the week commencing 27th. And then we'll be sending out a letter at the same time to those whose rounds will commence the following week on the 4th of October. The actual day of your collection has remained unchanged. The actual week cycle remains unchanged, but what we clearly understand is residents will not remember which week cycle they were on. Well, we wouldn't expect them to remember which cycle they were on back in the 22nd of July. So we'll be sending letters out to our garden waste subscribers, and we'll be doing social media, stuff on the website, updating as all next week as well.
Thank you very much, Andrew. Can I just ask who is paying for the letters to be sent out?
We will be paying Council Hornsby in the first instance, but it will find its way into a claim to the contractor.
Thank you very much, Andrew.
Could I come?
Yes,
could I
of
just
course.
come back on that? Thank you, Jenny. I mean, it's spot on. I think you deserve a round of applause for that. I'll put it on my Zoom. But you do also send out emails to people with their collections coming up. And you might want to think about using that mechanism as well. That's very popular, emails going out, to make sure you cover as many people, because you want a smooth restart, as smooth as possible. But thanks again for that, Andrew. It's been great. Thank you.
Thank you, Tony. Are there any other questions? Councillor Laszlo, or Laszlo, should I say?
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thanks very much, Andrew. That was a great update, and as Tony says, it's all good news. Just a couple of things. Who was the previous contractor?
It was Veolia.
It was Veolia.
Yes.
So my next question really is, if the contract was going forward for 10 years, I'm assuming, I mean, I've only been in the area 5 years, I'm assuming relatively smoothly, if it was. Why are they remodeling? Why did they have to remodel? And why were there so many problems if they'd been doing the job for 10 years? And my last question really is, who are going to be paying for the errors? I'm assuming there's going to be some sort of penalty, because everyone will be reimbursed, I'm guessing, for lost revenue.
I think Andrew probably can. I think he's probably answered actually in his presentation some of that, but I'll pass over to Andrew to perhaps repeat.
Yes. Thank you. Yes, as mentioned in the presentation, I think you first of all asked about why they've changed the routes, and the answer was that the routes hadn't been changed for about 10 years, so they were coming with new housing. They needed to review anyway. They believe they could make efficiencies, particularly with the new vehicles coming in. We've had a completely new vehicle fleet introduced for the new contract. They're bigger and more efficient and can do more compaction. And there was an aim to obviously make an efficient route to improve the carbon sort of outcomes from the service, which is very important these days. And overall, because they had that experience of the contract in the last 10 years, they had the knowledge to bring forward those proposals with a fair degree of confidence. You've asked, I think, why things went wrong, and I think I've outlined some of the reasons in there without going into repeating myself too much. But I think it's because the day-to-day routes were not necessarily correctly balanced between day to day. I think there was problems about the transfer of information from local knowledge, which they're built up, had not all been sort of correctly recorded. And finally, as explained, just as the service was perhaps getting its back on its feet, we then had the issues with the shortage of drivers, which all began to impact upon the call rounds. In terms of, yes, the contract does have contract penalties, and we are, reviewing our options in terms of other potential costs that could be claimed for the disruption, including to the garden waste service. But I can't really say too much more in a public forum, as you would expect.
No, sure. I understand a bit about economizing routes and the environmental issues, but crikey, I would have thought if someone had been doing the job 10 years then over that 10 years, they would have, you know, along the way, they would have economised and found ways of doing things quicker, etc., etc. I don't know if there were any problems in the previous few years, but thanks very much indeed for the explanation. And yeah, I know we can't say too much about the penalties, but anyway, thank you very much.
I think, Laszlo, as Andrew said, prior to the new contract taking place, a lot of the operatives have built up their own knowledge, and probably that wasn't transferred onto the database, which again was a new database. I know, for instance, that a number of new housing estates or cul-de-sacs were not actually on the new list, and though they'd been in place for some time, but I think the operatives were so familiar with it. I think Andrew, tell me if I'm wrong. I think one of the other problems was that they changed, while they changed the routes, they also changed the operatives.
That's quite correct, Councillor Holmesby. I think when initially the number of the changes were quite extensive to impact obviously on 48% of the district anyway, but the changing of crews around meant that there had to be sort of greater to learn their local knowledge again, but also because the turnover of staff because of the driver shortage meant that you had new drivers starting and going very quickly onto the main routes, and so you do need to build up a local knowledge. I mean, if you've never driven one of these HGVs around this area before, it does take a while to kind of learn your routes, and to particularly, I think, in the rural areas, and also to find presentation points and bulk. It's not an easy. It sounds easy, obviously, just to pick up bins, but it's not an easy service when you actually get into sort of technicalities of it. But you're quite right, Councillor Holmesby. Yes, I think it was the mixing up of crews probably didn't help as well.
Thank you. Are there any other points? Any other questions? Mike?
In a previous life, I used to design AD plants in vessel composting, windrows, recycling plants, and then just prior to retirement, I worked 15 years for RAT, Waste Recyclers Action Programme, where I was an organics monitor there and had to monitor the treatment plants that took in this waste. So I suppose my question is really the post-collection disposal. Obviously, one of the big problems we found at RAP is people would design quite a sophisticated plant to handle the food waste and the green waste. And then the collection regimes would change, the quantities would change. And then the whole root of all this is to recycle as much as we possibly can. So I suppose my question is, do we actually monitor what happens post-collection, i.e. the disposal and the treatment after the lorries have picked it up, and do we hold them to account as to how they treat the recycled waste? Because it is treat, it's not really disposal. The food waste probably goes to an AD plant or in vessel composting to produce energy, and obviously the recycled bins go for material recycling. So sometimes a shortcut might be taken if they are under pressure, perhaps not to do the correct route of disposal post-collection. So do we actually monitor what happens after it's been collected?
Are you able to answer that, Andrew?
I can. The first thing I would say is you're quite right about the councils changing the way they collect from contract to contract, sometimes for very good reason. But what we are very keen to do, and there's been a Kent-based scheme as well, KCC have promoted a sort of single sort of waste collection solution across the county as far as possible, is that we maintained a consistency between our previous contract and this contract, because what we were keen to do was embed the collection scheme as was and going forward. The district council is what we call, and you're probably aware, a waste collection authority. We're not the waste disposal authority. That's KCC. who do monitoring of the quality of the materials coming into recycling. And they also give information about end destinations. I think it's available on their website. I think I looked at it quite recently. So I would refer you to KCC's website, because that will give you all the information about the end destination points.
Thank you, Andrew. Mike, did you want to come back?
Yeah, so I assume part of the contract was Veolia was specifying the disposal points post-collection, then was it? And then obviously the responsibility goes on to KCC regarding monitoring that.
KCC identified disposal points, and obviously they get included, they get identified within the contract.
Yeah, I mean, obviously Veolia do run some recycling
Yes, they do.
plant, don't they? So it might
They do
well be
indeed.
this in-house.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Any further questions?
Councillor Mullard's got his hand up, Jenny.
Yeah, I've got my hand up there.
Oh, sorry, Terry. I couldn't leave you out. I'm really
Yeah,
sorry
we are.
about that.
Yes, around Robin, really, not specifically to do with waste collections, but in fact, we know that HGV drivers are thin on the ground and are getting offered 50k a year to start in various places. And that, in a way, in my mind, long since retired, but as a chartered engineer, long since retired, it's a symptom. We've been pressurised to build more houses. That just means you need more brickies and carpenters and electricians. There's not enough of them. So they're getting offered a lot more money. Conversely, you have the civil service, for example, that is actually not pressurising at all for its workers to go back into the office. I think they might find that they never actually did anything there anyway. I spent 7 years in the civil service. I left 7 years, it was way ago in the 70s. I spent 7 years in the civil service as an engineer. I left because I just could not get my head around passing useless bits of paper around. Believe me, that's what happened in the civil service. And people that I've always said, my son-in-law is a banker, and I've always sort of discussed banking with him. I said, you don't make a paper trip between you. And he agrees with that. Oh, yeah, but we make money. They only make money because they charge more when they want to up the interest rate or up in interest rate to get more money in. In a nutshell, I'm quite pleased to see that people that work with their hands now are beginning to be recognised more so than people that don't work with their hands. And I claim to be one of those that don't work with it, mythically work with your brain and a pen, I suppose. But yeah, I'm pleased to see this, and it will get worse or better depending on your outlook. It's going to be more money for, how can I use it? More money for the workers. And that's all I wanted to say.
Thank you, Terry. I don't think we can put the world to rights in this particular forum, but take on board your comments. Are there any other questions or comments?
Yes, Jenny, if I could just say something in support of Terry's broad thrust. People should place much more value on those who do and make and are skilled. And if they bring back the apprentice, journeyman and craftsman standard and pay people based on their experience, and I'll be a very happy person, because they abandoned that in the 70s. But I will say, in defense of KCC, and I would say this, wouldn't I? We've had 5,000 people working from home, and they've been brilliant, absolutely brilliant. I can't speak too highly of our officers. And I have heard a rumour that Jenny's retraining for an HGV license. I know it's true. But,
if I was a bit younger.
But in all seriousness, it is going to be a changing world. And I think we've got to put more value on those jobs that service people and help people out, care homes and the like. And I think we're going to go through a revolution, not before time. Thank you, Jenny.
Thank you, Tony. I think we've expressed a few views on this forum tonight. Don't disagree with them. Are there any further questions for Andrew? Frank, I thought you was very quiet tonight. You need to unmute, Frank.
What I was going to say is thank Andrew for his time and presentation. We weren't too bad out here. We're still on the same day, although there were individual cases where things didn't collected. There was one house that didn't have its food waste collected for 3 weeks. And there were odd ones like that were missed. Hopefully they all reported them. Whether they did or not, I don't know. It does seem to have stabilised now. I haven't had any complaints for a while, so one presumes that everybody is reasonably happy. I mean, I spoke to the boss just now about the garden waste being reinstated, which quite handy because I got a bit fed up now with wheeling the green bin across the road and tipping the grass up somewhere to get rid of it. So we'll be glad to see that back. And I presume at some stage, as it said in the original, that the now they know how long it's going to be, that the refund that we were all going to get will be coming through in due course. It obviously couldn't come until such time as it was known how long the break was going to be. That's it.
Thank you, Frank. I think Andrew did mention that's under consideration at the moment. Are there any further questions for Andrew? Okay, just before Andrew goes, then I would just like personally to thank him. He's been at the thick end of all this, and he's coped with an awful lot over the last few weeks. And I'd just like personally to thank him, because I have to say that if people contacted me, I would contact him, and within probably a few hours that situation was resolved. And I think that applied to most councillors. It was resolved pretty quickly. So I would just like personally to thank him and the team for what they did during that time, which was a pretty difficult period. And I really hope that the garden waste service will come back as normal and that we will not have any further problems. Don't know if there's anything you want to add, Andrew.
I'll just say, well, thank you very much for your comments, Councillor Hornsby. That's very much appreciated, because as I say, it has been quite a difficult time for everyone, including our residents, and I do appreciate that. In terms of garden waste, I just would say that we are making arrangements for additional vehicles to be operating. There's certainly the first two weeks of the restart, because we do expect there to be additional tonnages that has been anticipated. We don't really know how much those tonnages will be, but please bear with us as the service restarts. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Andrew, and thank you for the presentation. So that completes that item, and the only other item on the agenda is any other business. Anybody want to raise or?
Is the presentation going to be sent out with the minutes?
Andrew, is that possible?
I've sent it to Kate already, so.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, I can do that. I can attach that.
Thank you very much. Is there any other business? No? Right.
Can I just say, Jenny,
yes.
Thank you for having me this week, and it's been quite a cheerful meeting. I'll come again.
Thanks, Tony. I was just going to remind people about the planning forum meeting, which is on the 28th of October. Be really good to have a good number of people there, because they're put on specially for parish councillors with different topics, planning topics that people are always asking about. So if we could just spread the word for parish councillors, please, I'd be grateful. And that's on the 28th of October.
The last one wasn't very well attended.
No. So if there's no other business, then I declare the meeting closed, and thank you very much indeed for your time.